Awesome. Okay, so it is 6:01. I know we'll still have people coming in, so we'll go ahead and let people trickle in, but we don't want our speakers to wait. We're super excited to have Allan with us today and Dr. Wilkinson with us today. So welcome to another episode of FST5 webinar with Manisha and Kobe. Taylor is your host. I will go ahead and introduce Dr. Wilkinson, and then Kobe's going to introduce Allan. But before I do that, we'll go ahead and get our housekeeping out of the way. Thank you guys for all being here. And for anyone that's new, FST5, Frontline Strong Together program, is a program for first responders and their families. The 5 wraps around the 5 different disciplines that we service through this project, which is law enforcement, fire, EMS, corrections, and 911 dispatch. During this time, if you'd like to check out the webinar, the website, please do at fst5.org. Or if there's any crisis needs or resources needs that you need, you can call our 24/7, 365 phone line at 1-833-34-STRONG. That is 1-833-347-8766. So you'll see as we are speaking, as each of us are speaking, the website, the phone number will stay up top. Feel free to use the QR code as well. That will bring the website and the information right up on your cell phone. So Q&A today, we'll take all our questions through our Q&A chat box in addition to the traditional chat box. So just our panelists will speak today. So please do ask questions. I think you guys are going to absolutely love our presenter today. We're super excited to have him. I don't know if only a few folks were able to hear me tell the story about having to beg for Allan to come back and be a part of our webinar today. So we're super excited that he's here. And thank you so much, Kobe, for taking on the begging for us. But this is going to be an awesome webinar. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our expert today, Dr. Jason Wilkinson. He is associate professor with clinical associate professor with the Department of Psychiatry, in addition to counselor and psychologist, and is one of our lead clinicians working with the FST5 peers. He sees directly our FST5 patients and leads some pretty great treatments in this area. So I do want him to have an opportunity to talk about that shortly. So Dr. Wilkinson, please, if there's anything to add.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'll look forward to talking after Allan does his speech there.
Perfect. Awesome. He looks like he's someplace warm, which is exactly what we need today, since we had, I think, about 3 seasons already today, at least in Southeast Michigan we have. So
that's my window, actually.
Yeah. Had some rain, snow, and it looks like spring out there today. Yeah. Next up is my co-host and my favorite dude, Kobe Taylor. Kobe is with our Traverse City Fire Department, and he's also a part of their peer team and the FST5 peer team. He does a plethora of other things, literally always working. So Kobe, will you please introduce yourself as well, sir?
Yeah, thank you. My name's Kobe Taylor, as Manisha said. I've been doing this, the Frontline Strong, with Manisha, and it's been going great. We've had a lot of good speakers on, and I'm super excited for our one tonight. Allan, someone I've gotten to know over probably the last 2 years. I mean, we've been just talking about just doing more and more of the webinars, what he's doing, and it's great to have him here tonight. So Allan's a firefighter paramedic in Canada, and he's also a nutrition specialist. He really strives hard on nutrition, wellness, self-care, something that we all struggle with. So I'm happy to hear his story and hear how he could help us this evening. So Allan, go ahead.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks guys. Yeah, you know what? Thanks for having me here. I'm always super honored to come and do presentations like this and you know, to be part of networks and just be able to share my story. You know, really, because like what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my story here tonight with you guys, of my journey through emergency services and kind of where, you know, that deep dark place that I got to, and then to where I am today in my life and how I'm functioning in my life, and then also kind of how like I work with first responders and help them create the change that they want to make in their life. So you know, so ultimately that's going to kind of be the flow of things. And so I want to start off with saying, you know, like I'm a second generation firefighter. So my dad was a firefighter growing up when I was a kid. And, you know, I just remember, you know, wanting to become some way, shape or form into emergency services. And when I was in junior high, I was like, oh, I want to be a police officer. And that kind of just changed throughout the time as I was going through school. And then just talking with my dad, and like I always had fear of fire, and I used to have dreams that my dad would die in a fire, and so I kind of never even entertained becoming a firefighter initially. And so I was just sitting with my father one day, and he's like, you know what, why don't you go become a paramedic? And I was like, oh, I couldn't do that. I can't deal with all the blood and the guts and the, you know, the vomit and stuff. And he just laughed. He's like, oh, it's not like that. You know, he's like, just go down to our local EMS station and just go and interview the guys. And I was like, okay. And so that's what I did. And they put me in connection with their ride along auxiliary coordinator. And that kind of started my process, right? And I was like 18 years old, like just finished high school. And I just got into the industry right away. And I fell in love with my first ride along, you know what I mean? Like in the back of the ambulance, the lights going, all of that stuff. But the paramedics that I was working with, they seen something in me, and they seen like a lot of passion, a lot of fire, a willingness to learn. And so they kind of took me underneath their wing, and they actually signed me up for my first program for the emergency medical responder program without me even knowing it. And he was like, hey, by the way, you owe me, I can't remember what the price was at the time, like $600. He's like, you owe us $600. We got you registered into the school for the EMR program. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, you're going to go to school. I was like, okay. And I just did. And I started that process. And that's kind of how I started my career. So I just fell in love with EMS, and I did as many ride-alongs as I could. And I went to EMR school and then eventually to EMT school. I worked as an EMT for 5 years, and then I decided to take the jump to become an advanced care paramedic. And in my first year of paramedic school, the city that I was working with at the time had a private ambulance contract, and it was coming up for renewal, and the fire department was taking over. And I was like, oh, this is my opportunity, and to work in an integrated fire service. So I made it through the hiring process, got hired on, you know, and spent all of my career there, and you know, became an advanced care paramedic, you know, got married, had kids, you know, got the dog, you know, built the house, and did all of those things. But as awesome as things were in the very beginning, you know, things started off to a very aggressive start. And, you know, Kobe, you'll know this term, like I'm a black cloud, right? I'm a black cloud. And what that means is like, if it's a bad call, Allan's going to be on it. Like, no, you know what I mean? Like Allan's career is full of all of these super high acuity, super intense calls. And he's a black cloud. And so the very first call that I did was a 6-month-old Sid's death. And so I remember, and it was like literally like I just got my first full-time job. I just got my license. I was working in a basic life support service area, very rural, and we get called, and I didn't even know like what the call was. I was so new, and my partner's just like, yeah, like we're going to this call. So we pull up, and I remember it was November, it was snowing, and this woman just frantically opens this door, and she's like, hurry, hurry, hurry. And so we go into the house, and I just remember seeing this lifeless 6-month-old baby that was laying there wearing, and I remember it very clearly, was wearing these dinosaur onesies, and he was purple, right? He was very cyanotic, and he was pulseless and apneic, And so, you know, I picked him up off the floor and started CPR, moved him out to the truck, and away we went to the hospital. And everything just happened so fast. But in the back of the ambulance, it was almost like things slowed down for a moment, and I started crying. And a tear kind of rolled down my face, and you know, it was just me and my partner. So I was going CPR bagging, and I remember that tear rolled down my cheek, and I wiped that tear, and I said, "Why are you crying?" First responders, they don't cry, right? I'm like, you can't cry. So I wiped that tear, and I kept doing my thing. We arrived at the hospital, and when we rolled in with this pediatric, the nurses were emotional. And they were crying. And I was like, why is everybody crying? Like, we're supposed to help. Like, why are, you know, like what's going on here? This is really weird. And I kind of disassociated myself from it. And at the time, I didn't realize like that what I was doing is I was, you know, trying to protect myself, right, from feeling these emotions. And I was so new into the industry, like I wasn't even in the industry long enough for people to be like, for me to hear that, well, this is what you signed up for. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen, you know, all those cliche things that, you know, some people say. I wasn't even in there long enough to hear that stuff. And so I just buried it. And I went on to the next call, you know, and the next call just happened to be a head-on collision with a fatality, very traumatic. Lots of bad things happened on that call, and I just buried it. And like, you got to remember, I'm like 18 years old, 19 years old, right? So I'm very young. You know, I don't have a lot of life experience. I've never seen anybody dead before, let alone babies or very traumatic deaths. And so I started developing these coping mechanisms to help me kind of deal with how I was feeling. And what I essentially did is I told myself, I was like, you know what? These aren't humans. These are like broken vehicles. I'm a mechanic, and I'm here to fix them. And that's what I did. And I did that for years, and going after bad call after bad call. And you can just think of the worst calls that you've been on in your career. And then it just started taking over my life, but I didn't recognize it. I was so like blind by it, right? I did such a good job at numbing myself and coping. And it started to have a direct impact in my life, but I didn't realize it. So you know, you fast forward to I'm married now, and I have young children. You know, the depression is starting to kick in. I'm not liking how I'm feeling, so I'm using food to like make me feel good, right? And I'm using alcohol to numb me out. And I was in this vicious spider web of like, I would eat to feel better, and then I would feel better, and then the guilt would kick in of like, oh, you're fat, you're overweight, what are you doing? And then I'd be back to the food, and then I'd be like, oh, and then I'd drink, right? Like, and I was stuck in this web. And so I was emotionally suffering. And what that did is it disconnected me from the human function of our job, of like what we actually do. Because in our career, it's a career of service. We're there to serve other people in their time of need. And I wasn't able to do that because I wasn't serving myself first. And I'll kind of get to that after. But that got me to the point where I was struggling. Now I've been in the industry probably about 16, 17 years. And you know about the stigma now. You hear the people, you see the judgment, you see people losing their jobs. You see people taking their lives due to depression, anxiety, PTSD. So I've experienced this now, and I had fear. I was like, I can't speak up. I don't want to be judged by my brothers and sisters that I'm not capable of doing this job. So I just kept it quiet, and I just kept going. And then I sustained a back injury. So now I'm suffering not only with mental pain, I'm suffering with physical pain, right? And so my body was just in this massive amount of stress, right? So I wasn't eating right, I wasn't drinking right, I wasn't sleeping right. I didn't have any healthy coping mechanisms. All of my coping mechanisms were very unhealthy. I was drinking lots, partying, eating terrible food. What's water? You know what I mean? And definitely not sleeping properly. Anytime I was not working, I was partying and hanging out. There was no balance in my life, but this is how I functioned. And it got me to the point where I was severely depressed, pretty much an alcoholic, and now I was contemplating taking my own life. So I was starting to have suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideations, the back injury, you know, going back, some family history is when I was younger, my dad suffered an injury as well. The doctors prescribed medication, and it put him into a very dark place as well. He became suicidal. You know, all of those things kind of ran through my head. I had to, you know, physically fight my dad for weapons, you know, and like all of that stuff as from my childhood came up. So I didn't want medication, right? So I refused that medication, but I self-medicated. And so it got me to that deep, dark place. And I just was like, I'm at my final straw. Like, what am I gonna do? You know, I'm drunk, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. I have my young daughter who at the time wasn't in school. She's running around just playing aim like innocently. And I'm like, what are you doing? And I had almost like this out of body experience of like, man, you got to get your crap together. Because if you don't, you know where it's going. And it's weird. Like when I explain it and I share this to other people, it was almost like I had this like out of body experience where I could see myself laying on the couch, you know, and watching my daughter run by. And it was almost like I was above kind of watching this happen. And it was the person that was above, like made that decision, like enough's enough. It's time to get your life back together. And so I put that drink down and I sobered up and I was like, I do what most people do. And when you're fat and overweight, what do? I'm going to go work out. Right. I was an athlete growing up. I played competitive hockey. I played competitive football. I was a Firefit competitor. So I was I was very familiar with being active. But throughout my career, and you know, like when you get married and you have kids and you're on the job and you do all those things, you kind of like lose some of those things that you like to do along the way. Like I used to like to snowboard and golf and play hockey and football, but you have other priorities, taking care of your kids, your family, your wife, paying your mortgage, going to work, working overtime because you want X or whatever. And so I started losing all of those things that brought me joy. And so I was like, I got to start working out, but I feared working out because of my back injury. So what ended up happening is I herniated L5, bulged L3, L4, or sorry, herniated L4, bulged L3, L5. I have narrowing facet joints, degenerative disc disease, transitional S1. I had atrophy. I had all of this stuff going on with my back. So it was hard to even put on socks in the morning, right? And so I fell over on my face trying to pick up a golf ball out of the hole. So that brought in fear of like picking up my daughter. Right? Like she always, Daddy, pick me up. And I was like, honey, I can't pick you up because I feared dropping her. And so all of this stuff was transpiring. And then I finally went to our fire department doctor and he was like, Allan, you have the back of an 80-year-old man. And he's like, you have decreased mobility. You like, I had a hard time putting on my bunker boots. It was hard to get dressed in my turnouts, putting on my socks, all of those things. And he's like, maybe you should look at retiring. And I was like, wow. And then I was like, wall, right? Like, no, this is what I do. I've been doing this since I was young. This is who I am, right? I identified as I'm a firefighter paramedic. And if I lose this, then who am I? So I was like, nope. And I hid it very, very well until I got to that point where I had my wake-up call. But that wake-up call was good. It's what I needed because that was the transition that I had that started me on the path to starting to take care of myself and learning what I needed to go through in order to be where I'm at today. So I started working out, and it was painful because I was just coming off of a broken leg as well. So my leg was swelling, I had lots of pain, my back was atrophied. There was a lot of physical pain there, but something just told me, just keep going, man. And I started working out at home, just moving my body. I didn't work out in the gym at the stations because I feared if people saw me just moving my body, they would judge me. And, oh, Allan's not capable of doing the job. So I was just like, I'm going to do this all quietly at home and start from there. So I lost like 30, 35 pounds, got into some, bit better shape, but I realized, like, if you really want to change your body and change how you feel physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of those things, you got to fix the way that you eat. You have to change the foods that you're eating. You have to stop with the drinking. You have to stop with the processed foods, and you have to really start feeding your body and really starting to take care of your body. And then once I started that, I was like, but I'm still depressed, right? And then I made the decision, or the realization, that I gotta take care of this too, right? So I was taking care of my body, but I wasn't taking care of my mind and my spirit. And then that's when I was talking to a friend, and he was like, man, if you really want to change your life and you want to improve your life and improve your mental health, he's like, you have to pick up a book. He's like, you got to start reading some personal development. He's like, you got to start reading things that you're struggling with, right? So I was struggling with self-doubt, imposter syndrome, stigma, depression, all of those things I was suffering with. And I was like, pick up a book. I'm like, you've seen me go through paramedic school. I barely studied, right? Like, I was just one of those guys that just never picked up a book. But I took his word for it, and it changed my life, right? So I'm constantly in the personal development now. So I knew that in order to create a strong body and a strong life, I need to have a strong mind. Like, I need to build some mental resiliency on top of the physical resiliency, right? So I need to be strong, not just in the gym lifting weights. I need to be mentally strong. I need to have really good, healthy coping mechanisms. And so I just started that. I was like, okay, I'm going to start eating better. I'm going to figure out how much I need to eat to lose weight properly and be healthy. I'm going to figure out how much water I need to be drinking. I need to really pay attention to my sleep. I need to work on stress management and take that time to come out of that hyper vigilant state that a lot of us first responders end up in, right? Because we're constantly in that stressful environment, right? And we have to be able to manage it, but we also live in stressful environments at home. So now keep in mind, when I started this journey of getting better, my wife was slowly falling out of love with me, because I was not the man that she married. I was this cold, dark, alcoholic, verbally abusive man that she now was living with. And I was not the person. And so she slowly fell out of love with me. And then she finally sat me down one day and she said, Allan, we need to talk. And I was like, okay. And I've been making some strides to really kind of take care of myself now. And it's probably a year or two later into my health journey. And she's like, I want a divorce. And I was like, what? I was completely taken off of course. And the one thing that she stood out to me that really made me open my eyes was, she said, you are strong enough now that I know I can leave and you won't kill yourself. And I was like, whoa. I was like, so how long have you been not happy? And then that started the process of me going back and going, how long was I suffering? Because I didn't know. So I just started kind of mapping myself through photos and stuff like that. And I looked and I could now see it in like photos. You can see it in my eyes, my fake smile, all of those things. And I was like, I was struggling before I even had kids. So there was a lot of struggle there, but she was like, I know that if I leave now, you're not going to kill yourself, that you're strong enough mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, that you will be okay. And I was like, wow. Right. I mean, she was right, but I had to essentially rebuild everything. I had to sell the beautiful acreage that we just built. I had to sell every possession that we had. I had to completely start over and completely reinvent myself. And one of the things that kept me going was all of the self-care habits, behaviors, and routines that I started to develop and start to work through. It helped me start to deal with all of the stress and adversity that was about to come. And I mean, and that's why I'm so passionate today, you know, I mean, and that's why I was like, you know, I got to the point in my journey where I started kind of sharing it on social media. I was like, you know, I'm going to kind of share this as some accountability that, hey, I'm working on getting healthier, and sharing about some stigma. And it took me a little bit to share that I was personally struggling, but it finally came through as I continued to work on myself. And then first responders were just like, hey man, like I noticed, you know, you're losing weight, you're looking good, you're happier, you know, like I'm stuck, can you help me? And that's kind of where the transition started, with me starting to work with people and start to coach other first responders. You know, and no disrespect to, you know, Dr. Wilkinson here, you know, but like as first responders, there's a big fear with reaching out to psychologists, and you know, and you're nodding, right? There's that big fear of like receiving that stigma. So I was kind of like that neutral peer. I was that, you know, that fellow peer, whether it's Kobe in the United States or, you know, someone on my own department or whatever. And they're like, you understand me, you've walked in our shoes, and I've watched your journey, and you inspire me. And so I want you to help me. And so, and that's just kind of where things started. And I was like, well, man, if people are wanting help, I should probably go get some education. Right. And then that's just where I started my education, and I started learning a little bit more, and, you know, became a nutritionist, and then, you know, a personal trainer and a tactical conditioning specialist, and just started getting all of this education and knowledge and practice, and just started growing. And then now I just, you know, I work with first responders, and one of the biggest things that they come to me with is improving their eating and losing weight. But we know deep down there's other things that are realistically holding them back from doing that. Right? Because realistically, when it comes to losing weight, it's simple, but it's not easy. Right? And that's what I really kind of coach on. Is that, oh, look at that. Yeah. So, you know, when we look at that photo, the one on the left there where I'm 28 years old, I'm holding my oldest son, he's turning 15 here right away. But I was struggling there. Like you can see it. You can see it in my eyes. You know, fake smile. I'm pretty overweight. And I was struggling there. You know, and then that photo, you know, like I'm older than that now, but, you know, that's when I was 42 years old. And I think like, you can just see the body posture, the smile, just everything is different, because I'm actually truly happy. Right. And there's a physical transformation there, but there's also a mental transformation there. But a lot of people can't see the mental transformation. They're just going to see the physical. But that's what a lot of people want, is they want that physical transformation. But they both go hand in hand. Right. And so I guess one of the things that I could lead it back to is one of the things that I see in the first responder world, that is having a drastic effect on our mental and physical health. Because they always talk about like cardiovascular disease was the #1 killer of firefighters, and now cancer has surpassed that. But, you know, I would like to say, like, you know what, stress should be up there as well, because stress is the start of all disease. Right. And so we have a lot of stress. And if you look at my story, you know, I wasn't sleeping right. So my circadian rhythms were all messed up, right? I wasn't eating properly. So my body was deprived of nutrients. And so I was in a state of nutritional stress. So I'm feeding my body all of this processed foods and high sugary type foods, which are causing internal stress inside my body. And we don't see it, right? Like we just eat a bag of chips, we don't see it, but on a chemical level, it is introducing and causing stress, right? I mean, it causes, high blood sugar, then it causes an insulin response, which causes a cortisol release, and all this other stuff starts to happen. And what we're doing is we're putting our bodies into a constant state of stress. So now I'm in a nutritional state of stress. I'm not drinking any water, so now I'm dehydrated, right? So not only is my body suffering, but my brain is suffering. I'm not sleeping properly. So I have all of these stressors that I have direct control over, but I'm not realizing I have direct control over it. And then I have the outside stressors of life and the job. So I'm working long hours, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm not going to the bathroom. People are spitting on me, yelling at me, fighting me, the world of emergency response, right? And that we can't take advantage of everyday human needs. Like you hold your bladder for hours. You go hours without eating, right? Hours without drinking water, hours or sometimes days without sleeping. And all of this is introducing stress. So your body's in this sympathetic response, and we're not meant to be there for a long period of time. Like that's a short-lived, biological response that takes us away from fear. But as first responders, we get very comfortable living there, right? Because we get addicted to the lights and the sirens and make an entry into a burning structure and saving that baby or arresting that guy or taking that really crazy call. And that's stress. But then we get to the point where we're not really fazed by it anymore. And that just becomes a norm. Right. And so a lot of people will refer to that as like they're burnt out. Right. And I like to say, no, they're in a constant state of hypervigilance, and that's their new normal now. Our bodies are based on adaptation. It will adapt to the environment that you put it in. So the emergency responder world and life is really tough. Lots of stress. I went through divorce, alcohol, food addiction, everything, right? Life is tough. And so we develop these defense mechanisms. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. Most times they're not, right? Like when everyone is stressed, you're not craving a cucumber, right? Like, what are you craving? You're craving the processed foods that are going to make you feel better and register that dopamine receptor in your brain and make you feel good. So then we start riding that dopamine roller coaster, and we're constantly looking for that next hit, whether it's social media, whether it's that cheeseburger, whether it's, you know what I mean? And that starts to add up. And if we keep going that way, we're eventually going to get to the point where a lot of first responders are, and they're at the point that I was at, where I was mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually broken. And I was thinking about taking my life because I needed a way out. I needed a way to feel better. And I didn't realize at the time that like self-care is going to make you feel better, but it's not instant. It takes work, daily work. And it's really tough to try to grasp that or to learn it, because I'm a big believer as well. And Dr. Wilkinson, I'm sure you can, I agree with me or add to it, but it's hard to learn anything new when you're in that state of stress, right? Like you just emotionally shut down, right? And you know what you need to do, but like that dopamine hit of that donut is just going to outweigh the the result that you really want, right? You know that this is the right way, but you're searching for that feel good moment. And that's why I'm so passionate about nutrition, right? Because nutrition has been proven, right? Like if we're hydrated properly, like a 1% dehydration has a direct impact on our mental health, right? The food that we put into our bodies has a direct impact on our mental health. But those are all things that we are in control of. And a lot of first responders are like, there's nothing out there to help me. All of these organizations, they don't care about me. They don't care about this. Da, 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 da. I'm just like, yeah, but you have to care for yourself. Like, it's a tough world. Realistically, like, I mean this with all due respect, but really nobody gives a shit, right? Like, they're too busy in their own world of chaos to worry about what you got going on, because they're worried about fixing their own self or trying to manage their own chaos. So it's up to you to want to take back control of your life. And the simplest things that you can do that will have a massive impact on your mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health is to really do what you need to do to take care of yourself. So start eating good food, eat the right food, right? 90% of the clients that I come in are their body's in complete starvation mode. They're not even eating enough to keep up with their basal metabolic rate, let alone their total daily energy expenditure that they're trying to do, right? They're completely dehydrated. Their stress is through the roof, right? They got life is pounding them. And it's amazing on what you can do when you start to take those simple steps. Right, like I just shared today in one of my Facebook communities on one of the clients I've been working with for the last couple of months. She's type 2 diabetic and her blood sugars were out of control and her weight is out of control. And since we started incorporating some of these simple things, her A1C has been the best it's been in 6 months. She feels so much better and is managing the outside stressors better because she's starting to manage all of these internal stressors. So those outside stressors aren't the catalyst that kind of breaks the camel's back, right? But it's a process of self-care. And I think as first responders, in order to serve and take care of others, we must learn how to serve and take care of ourselves first, because it's a job of giving, and giving, like, in their time of need, at any time of the day, doesn't matter if it's rain, snow, shine, tornado, earth, whatever's going on, we got to go. And so you got to be functioning at your best. And right now we have a lot of first responders that are showing up and are giving the people that we serve what's left of them versus the best of them. And our community doesn't deserve that. We don't deserve that. And so I feel like if we are very good at making sure that our wellness is taken care of, we will be in a far better place and start to recognize when first responders are mentally suffering, because they're going to have the confidence to come forward, because by taking care of themselves, they know who they are.
Now, I'm just going to jump in real quick.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. The idea of that right there, though, is that people who serve and serve and serve and serve, not only is it an identity, it's a lack of understanding how to take care of oneself, because all I'm doing is focusing on other on a continuous basis. So
That's
if
right.
if I do that, then what is self-care? That becomes the self-medication, as you identified, and whether that's food, alcohol, drugs, cocaine, sex, gambling, whatever it is, there's a basis there that's like, how does that really affect how the brain is? And you talked about the whole dopamine. If there was no dopamine, there would be no addiction, right? I mean,
That's right.
There would be no pleasure, there'd be no euphoria, right? We never have anything like that. But the idea about it too is that when you mentioned the idea of you got into exercise program, right? Exercise itself, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but that what sounded like changed a lot for you, and how that kind of then, I call them 4 friends, the physical, the emotional, spiritual, and the mental. if one's down, how do you get one of those others to kind of help out the other, right? So, and if they're all down, what's the one that has the most, 0 to 10? If this is only a 2 and all there's zeros, how do you help that out right there? But amazing, right? So in that way, stress, right? And you talked about the sympathetic response. You're right. When it was, the brain's about 2 million years old, if you will. The idea of that sympathetic response is like, it's supposed to come up and come right down. It's a predator prey kind of a thing. But now it just kind of holds on, and it gets worse, and it gets worse. But we'll talk about how exercise is helpful for that.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's the thing. What I was talking about is we get stuck in that sympathetic state, and that becomes our new normal, right? And we don't even realize we're struggling because that's just our new normal.
Yeah.
But if we're constantly working on managing that sympathetic state, and we're working at bringing our body back to homeostasis and really kind of, activating that parasympathetic nervous system. I mean, that's where our rest and digest happens. That's where our body's able to take all of the vitamins and minerals and nutrients that we're feeding it and actually absorb it into the intestines and give it to our bodies. That's where we have our brain recovers, our muscles recover, everything, right? Like our circadian rhythms balance out because our body's always looking for homeostasis. And when we take those self-care practices and we really know what it's like to be in a state of homeostasis, like this is a really good, relaxing state to be. If that becomes our new norm, then when we're not there, like you said, with the four sisters, they're like, when one's off, you're gonna know. You're gonna know. You're gonna be like, hey, wait a minute, something's not right, because you're gonna have a really good understanding of like your body. Like I know, like when my body is off, I'm like, uh-oh, like, okay, something's happening. And then I'm like, I get sick, right? Like, so like I'm really in tune with my body. I was like, oh wait, something's not right. And then I was like, guess what? Now I'm having surgery for my appendix. Like I'm very in tune with my body, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, because of these self-care practices, right? Like I meditate, I read personal development, I eat good food, I'm drinking my water all of the time, right? Like I manage my sleep and I manage my stress, and a lot of those key factors, my pillars, they all help each other out, right? So usually if I'm in a poopy mindset, I'm like, why am I so poopy? I'm like, I haven't picked up a book in 3 days. Oh, all right. You know what I mean? And then you kind of get back into the readings, and you kind of start to, be the gatekeeper of what comes in, because we can be easily, watch the news and then we get all, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm very careful of like the information that I allow my body to take in, because your body's always listening, right? Your body's always listening. And there's a really good book out there called The Body Keeps the Score, right? And it's just like, my body was keeping the score and I was miserable. Like, and I remember when I went to the pain clinic with my back, and the doctor looked at me and he was like, all your pain's here. And at first I didn't understand it. I was like, you're crazy. Like, what are you talking about? Like, how is it? You know what I mean? But once I started working through all that, like I haven't had back pain in years, and I'm in the best shape of my life. And all of the symptoms that I was having before, when my body was telling me something was wrong, I was completely ignoring them. Right? But that my body was giving me signs, like, you are in this state of stress. Right now, like pain-free, best shape of my life. I'm also 20 years older, right? Like, and so I can't preach it enough, Doc, on the importance of those 4 key pillars: proper hydration, proper nutrition, stress management, and like that mindset development, right? Building that mental and physical resiliency to deal with life.
And sleep, as you mentioned.
Oh yeah, and sleep. Yeah, sorry, and sleep. Yes, very important.
That's such a number one importance, right? But going back to the pain doctor for a second, right? What do they prescribe? Opioids.
Yeah,
right?
they
all
sure
the
did.
time. All that's where we go. What's interesting, and when it comes down to having that exercise, the diet, the basis of mental and spiritual well-being, to put the physical into a certain phase for a second, when we work out, or when we physical activity or movement, let's not call it exercise or working out, because those are definitely not so great connotations sometimes.
I like it. I love movement too. I use it all the time.
Yeah, movement. So the idea about that is, when it comes down to it, what's the one thing in our body that actually says, hey, you're doing something, let's go take a look. So you work out, you work out, you get the inflammation, right? You start to kind of feel that. Endorphins, right? This whole aspect of what happens when we start to work out and makes us feel better. Endorphins come and they actually reduce the pain. The more clinical, if I will, term for that, for an endorphin, is what's called an endogenous opioid. It's already inside of us. It's endogenous, it's within us, and the endorphin goes and it reduces the pain. So the opioid is already actually in us, and which reducing the pain in itself by something that we're doing that's free. It doesn't actually have a bunch of side effects per se. And we don't have to go to the doc and get all those different medications, all the different times with potential dependency, of course.
Yes.
But I just want to add that too, because the dopamine, the serotonin, the basis of mood, is also affected by not just exercise, but movement and physical activity, but also a couple other things. And I wanted to address, if I may, a couple of things that we talk about when it comes on to depression. The suicidality that comes with that, the anxiety that comes with that, and of course, traumas that are stored in the body, as you mentioned in that book by Bessel van der Kolk. The whole basis of it is this is stored. This is something that is within us. And Manisha mentioned in the beginning, I'm a practitioner with many different first responders, and I do this thing called what's called EMDR, and it's in their book, by the way, Body Keeps the Score. And if anyone has not read that, please really pick that up, get on Audible, whatever it is. But what we talk about in there is how the body, as it keeps it, it actually is trying to get to that homeostasis in the mind. So that key of balance is, if I just stretch, if I go out and, a scratch comes from a branch or whatever I hit, what's the body do? It's going to kind of heal that. I don't have to think about it. It just is going to kind of heal it. The mind wants to do the same thing. It wants to come back to that balanced point. But, excuse my language on this, like the stuff hits the fan, right? So then we don't have the ability to start shifting that. So it gets stored. And it gets stored when we're 18 years old, when we first see this stuff that's happening. And now I could be 44 or 50, 42 or 45. And it's still the same exact experience because it's stored in that way. I haven't thought about it any differently. And why I'm mentioning EMDR is because I just had a gentleman in here, fire as well. And the whole idea of like, my first thing when I was 20 years old is I had to do this. It, obviously very, very graphic. Don't have to trigger anybody. But the basis of it is came in like this on a consistent basis, just always in fight or flight, ready to charge, because that's what I was just, I'm just angry all the time, right? Because get into this, the amygdala, right? This part of our brain that says the 4 F's, fight or flight, feeling, food, and sex. So you can think of the last F on that one. But the basis of it is how all of those are part of that space, and it just keeps it. So he was just charged all the time. We did one session, and this is not necessarily typical or atypical, actually. His shoulders fell about 6 inches. He was able to let go and reprocess that thing that was there for 25 years. It is something that's a somatic therapy, so you actually are very body-based, and you're changing those chemicals. The whole idea of mood change with serotonin and dopamine. And why that's so important is because these things that are there and they're stored, it's not going to take 2-5 years to get rid of in therapy. It's going to be an aspect of when I go into something, will my body give this up? Because my body and mind are totally integrated and working together. My mind also wants that homeostasis, just like my physical aspect does. And I incorporate the emotional and the spiritual realms, the 4 sisters, 4 friends. The whole idea about that is all of that starts to kind of be pulled up. And it sounds amazing, sounds magical. It works, and it's actually there and very available to everyone, hopefully. But just wanted to give a little add to some of those things.
Yeah, no, I know EMDR is very, very powerful, and I know a lot of friends and first responders that have utilized it and love it, and they encompass it with, you know, the self-care, and it's another piece of the puzzle, right, to their self-care and their wellness, right? And
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of like having multiple resources and try to keep it as like homeopathic as we can, right? Like EMDR, you know, water, nutrition, sleep, like all of those things that are not like medication driven, right? Like every
Right.
doctor that I saw was just hitting me with prescription.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, and no disrespect to them or whatever, but I was just like, I'm happy that that I went through it more holistically, you know, and then I've developed these really good habits, behaviors, and routines, because now it's not about like, you know, wanting, like I started it because I wanted to lose weight because I was fat and ugly and didn't like what I looked, you know, when I saw in the mirror. But throughout that process, I mean, now it's just it's part of my self-care routine, and it's part of who I am. And you know, like I became the job,
Yeah.
right? And then and that's I feel like that's where a lot of first responders get to, is like they lose themselves throughout the process, throughout their career, and with life events and all of those other things. And you know, first responders, it's a thing of service, like you said, right? Like I mean, a lot of people work because they get that dopamine hit, like this is good, and they overwork themselves. And then if that's being threatened and being taken away, right, like they go into that defense mode and they have those identity crises and they don't know who they are, right? Like I lost myself. I didn't golf anymore. I didn't play hockey. I didn't go snowboarding. I wasn't the family man, you know, and I became this dark, ugly, like you said, like that gentleman. I was just like, I was very angry and
Yeah.
was emotionally hurting my spouse, you know what I mean? And like I was just not who I was, and I lost myself. But one of the hardest things I had to do was recreate myself, right? And my good friend Dan Sundahl, you know, he uses the word too, is post-traumatic growth, you know, and a lot of people are trying to get back to like who they were before all of this bad stuff happened. I was like, but you can't go back to that person, because that person back then doesn't have the experiences that the person does now. But we can utilize what's happened for us, not to us, to help us elevate to an even higher level, right? And so like I've used all of my adversity, the back injury, the broken leg, the divorce, the alcoholism, the emotional eating, all of those things, and I worked myself through them to create a very strong and resilient and healthy individual that can like now withstand life. So now I train for life. I'm not training to lose 20 pounds. I'm training to deal with the battles of life, because guess what? Life is tough for everybody, and it's not getting any easier, right? We have pandemics that just randomly show up and completely change our lives. If you don't have those good habits, behaviors, and routines, that's another straw that's gonna, you know what I mean? That's gonna cripple you. And that's what I'm about teaching, is teaching first responders like how to become healthy, how to take care of their wellness so that they can wake up and realize when they're struggling, and then they know it's okay to ask for help, right? You know, because
Right.
they recognize it. I went God knows how many years without even recognizing it because I just
Right.
ignored it.
And the challenge there is, you just talked about patterns, making lifestyle changes, right? Ellen, how do you do that, right? So the basis of it is I just need to start someplace. I just need to take one step of that 1,000-mile journey kind of a thing. And when it comes down to actually some physical activity of that movement, exercise, when we talk about changing the brain through exercise, just for example, it just takes the one time of exercise to actually start to form something different in the brain. And with that idea of like, here's the endorphins and here's the basis of that. But there's really 4 neurotransmitters. And you mentioned the whole dopamine thing, right? Dopamine is about euphoria, but it's also about memory. Serotonin, it's about mood. It's also about learning, memory. Changes what's called glutamate. It talks about how the plasticity of the brain can kind of shift. If we're very low on that, because we're not having any movement, and the brain doesn't actually begin to change. It doesn't have the malleability that it needs. And then the GABA. GABA's our friend. Oh my God, GABA's our friend.
Yeah,
So
I love
if we're
GABA,
very,
yeah.
if we're very high in GABA,
Mhm.
we have low anxiety. If we have low GABA, we're very anxious and nervous. The key about all that is affected with movement and exercise just one time. And as that becomes more that pattern, right, it just is like, here's one thing and here's another time I do this. And it begins to have this idea of kind of a movement down the hill, if you will. One thing that's also there, and this is probably going off a little bit, but the whole vagus nerve that's about the autonomic nervous system and the parasympathetic response, which is the relaxation piece, is that vagus nerve actually hits a lot of different organs, about 70%. But what it does is, and I've been doing this, and I'm a testimony myself, and it's not easy in the beginning, but I do 30 seconds of cold water at the end of every shower now.
Yeah, the cold
Oh
shower.
my gosh, that
Love
is, well, it's not a cold shower, it's a warm shower. I just turned it to cold is at the last 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But I cannot not do that now. It's like daggers in the beginning, but what does it do? It elevates mood. It gives balance to kind of what the insides are having. And that 30 seconds of that cold water, it's allowing that, again, that vagal nerve to actually have high tone, which means that you're relaxed that much more.
Mhm.
And I can't tell you how much, and this is where I think it's really important, when you talked about the digestive piece of that one side of our nervous system. When we're anxious, when we have trauma, when we have all these other things, that whole thing shuts down. So
That's right.
what shuts down? Sleep.
Mhm.
What shuts down? Eating. What shuts down? Elimination, as you said, like going to the bathroom. It shuts down all these different aspects of the body when I have high anxiety. And then what shuts down first? Our saliva.
Yeah.
Because saliva is going to make you digest. That's why you get dry mouth. I'm
Yeah.
anxious. And then it shuts down all that digestive system. And then, of course, what happens? We have a bunch of GI issues. And the GI is our second brain, which then leads to, over 90% of our serotonin, our whole mood balance is actually in our stomach,
That's right.
in our GI. So it's like, wait a second, I thought it was up here. No, it's in our body. And our body, if we have movement, can start to regulate and balance those things. And we just need to start with one aspect. And that one aspect, if I may, this will be my final point. The whole idea about that is that when it comes down to having this exercise that really does some things that are really frontal lobe based, is memory. And one of the things that we are all about in our society now, we're not all about, but we look at Alzheimer's, we look at dementia, we look at the long-term care. You have baby boomers, 20,000 a day, turning 65. I mean, it's all of this stuff, and memory is a big concern. And when you put exercise in there, it activates those three areas: frontal, hippocampus, which is for long-term memory, but also that amygdala we talked about with the 4Fs. But why that's so important is because if we put this movement into place, how much does that now change the future for then not having the trajectory that we would have if exercise wasn't there? And now dementia and these learning or memory aspects diminishing may not occur. And I just need to do some things now, 3 times a week for 30 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise. If I put that into place, I may not activate that gene that now says, hey, you have this memory concern, and now exercise epigenetics kind of put it in a different light so it didn't come out. And now I don't get those same extraordinary unfortunate circumstances in later life.
Yeah, it's super
Changes.
powerful. It's super powerful, right? I mean, and a lot of the things, I mean, and one of the biggest reasons that I focus on food as well, because I mean, I know a lot of people don't like exercise, right? And that's why I utilize the word movement as well, is as long as you're moving, right? Whether you're going out walking your dog, or you're rock climbing or kayaking, or you're hitting the gym lifting weights, like as long as you're getting some sort of movement, your body is going to love it. Like we're meant to move. But as a society, we get so caught up in the job and work and all of those other things that we lose taking care of ourselves. And the reason that I utilize food is because people want to lose weight and they want to feel better and all those other things, but we all have to eat, right? Not everyone's going to work out, but we all have to eat. So we might as well eat really, really well. And that is going to have like the biggest impact in our overall health because of, the serotonin levels and the decreased stress inside the system and proper nutrients and hydration and the sympathetic nervous system. And all of those other things are so powerful. And it's quite common that when we start to get that habit established, that movement just naturally starts to come with it after anyway, because they're like, I feel so good. I have a lot of energy. Like I'm sleeping better. You know what I mean? And they're just like, and it just happens, right? But I mean, I always keep that under my hat. Like, let's start you with nutrition because we all have to eat, and that is like the focal point, and then everything else can start to come after that, right? So if we can establish those solid habits, behaviors, and routines around proper nutrition and hydration, once we lock that in, then it makes it easier to take on other tasks. Right?
Absolutely.
So, okay, now I want to have movement or some sort of this, or I want to do this. It makes it easier. It helps with the bandwidth in our brain, right? Because otherwise we get too overwhelmed and we don't take any action. And well, we don't need more stress. First responders do not need more stress. So baby steps, work on these 4 key pillars: hydration, nutrition, movement, and sleep. Lock those in, and we'll be in a far better place as first responders. But like you said, as us becoming seniors into our senior years, we're going to be in a lot better place. So that's what I'm trying to teach. And and that's what I'm trying to teach and trying to push forward and teach our first responders. And,
and even that movement idea, like getting started.
Sorry?
I don't know if, and even that movement idea of like getting started again, the whole idea about that is like the small steps, as you said. Like, I don't know if anyone watches regular TV anymore, but the whole basis of like a commercial coming on. What a great cue of just going, okay, I just need to get up for this 2 to 4 minutes. I can jog, I can walk in place, march in place. I can just, do a couple of jumping jacks. I just get up and move during that commercial and sit back down, right? But I'm doing something and it's activating, and it's just a beginning of something. But as I feel better, as I feel more like whatever it is, and just regularly, like boxing, just doing this while you're in the commercial, just doing whatever it is. It's the idea of that movement will become, it'll be the catalyst to kind of keep it moving because I'll feel better. So I just wanted to add a couple starting points. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So I mean, that's, guys, that's my journey, and that's kind of my mission right now. I talk to people like this. I work with clients and stuff, but I mean, that's my mission, is to like just give first responders those simple, basic tools that we all have access to. We all have access to good food. We all have access to, sleep. And I mean, might not be able to control it when we're on shift, but when we're off of shift, we have full control over it. So let's try to make sure that we're managing those things. And, and it's super simple. Like, it's super simple, right? Like, eat good food, drink your water, you know what I mean? But it's not easy. It's not easy. And that's where, with the coaching that I provide, it's helping them, coach them through that, because they have those other blocks that hold them back, that keep them from that, right? And just their old habits. Like, my habit is I self-sabotage myself, right? Like, or whatever, right? So whatever their reasons are, but that's kind of like the message that I want to get out there, is like, if we can take better care of ourselves, it may seem like kind of crazy, like, what do you mean, how's eating good and drinking, like, and it's going to have a direct impact on mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health, inside at a chemical level, but also outside in how you present yourself and how you show up to the world. And so I just want to keep spreading that message and sharing to all of the first responders that are out there, like, there is hope and there is help, but you also got to take some responsibility and start taking some of the steps necessary to help yourself, because ultimately that's what it comes down to, is you got to be willing to help yourself. And that self-care goes a long, long way.
And it takes time, right, Alan? I think we talked about this 2 meetings ago with the patients, right? First responders, really, we're short on that, right? We put water on the fire and we want it to go out. So this takes a while to see those results and really start to see the good food kicking in. And and exercise and seeing the results, whatever that is that you want to see it takes time and takes patience. And that's another skill we have to learn, is that waiting for that to kick in.
Exactly, right? Because when you eat a cucumber, you're not going to see immediate results. You go to the gym, you're not going to see immediate results, right? Like it takes repetition, right? It's like that compound effect, right? I mean, the compound effect is working for us either in our favor or not, right? And it's the little things that we do over time that have a big drastic effect. But the same thing, I mean, if you drink a diet pop or a pop every day, not a big deal, but over 1 year, you're going to be 50 pounds heavier and probably be diabetic, right? So we have to realize that, but we're stuck in that state of that instant gratification. We're constantly chasing that dopamine hit. We're looking for temporary satisfaction and temporary relief. Like, this makes me feel good and I need to feel good now, right? But it's where that cucumber, for example, is going to make you feel good later, and that's what we want, right? But I mean, as humans, we're like, like the doctor said, like we want it now. Like it's like that addiction, right? Like I need to feel better now. I feel stressed, I got anxiety, whatever's happening in my life, I want to feel better now. Chocolate bar. Like that's the habit loop that they've built in their brain. So it's tough to interrupt those neurons that fire and say, like, you feel poopy, your habit is to do this, go do that, and that equals this. It's hard to undo that, right? It's hard to undo that whole habit loop, and because it's just that's what we've done, and it's an unconscious thing, right? Like it's an unconscious thing. It happens without us even thinking about it.
And those
The
bad
largest thing-
habits start at day one in the academy. I don't know about you, but I don't remember nutrition being talked about in our academy.
And
And
that's
I
one of
came
the
up through the paid on call and went through that academy, so we didn't even have fitness in there. It was just show up, do some schoolwork, and that was that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And people have always asked me, like, how do we make this change? And I said, well, the one thing is it's got to start in the school system. But I said, because we're always taught, we're always taught, how do we save everybody else but ourselves? Right? So that's a problem. But realistically, Kobe, and this is me too, when I'm 18 and I'm in EMT school and someone is coming and talking to me about self-care and nutrition, what am I going to do? I'm 18, I'm in my prime. That's for old people. I don't need to worry about, and you just completely discard it. Right? So you don't know what you don't know. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I've learned this through trial and error, and that's why I share my story, because it's just like, we're trying to teach people, right? So that you can learn early on. Do I think it needs to be in the school systems? You betcha. Not just in EMT school, in elementary school.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If you guys have questions, comments, anything, please go ahead and put in the chat or put in the Q&A. It's funny that cucumbers, Allan, because I'm not even being facetious. They are my favorite. But also our cookies are too. So I'm totally absorbing everything here right now. I'm taking this all in right now. I am going to make a conscious decision to eat cucumbers tonight rather than cookies. So
right. Yeah.
I did want to touch base on a few different things. Both you and Dr. Wilkinson mentioned. I think that the idea of movement, I think from what we've seen in working with first responders, is that it's the space that people will move until they can't anymore, and sometimes that too can become a negative coping skill. So when we mention the words like self-care, and when we mention words like coping skills, the idea is that you are not causing yourself or your body any more harm. The idea is that you're doing not only what's best for your physical health, but also what's best for your mental health, right? What's best for your brain as well. And I know the number one thing that I get from my first responders is that I need a quick fix. I need you to fix me now. I want to go back to work in 2 weeks and 3 weeks and all of the space. And it's not going to be a quick fix. It's not, it doesn't take you don't get 30 pounds heavier overnight, right? So you're not going to lose that weight overnight. But I promise you, if this is something that is important to you, if working on yourself and working on your self-care and being better for not only yourself, but for your family, your children, your coworkers, your fellow first responders, the community that you serve, we can help you get there. absolutely these steps will be able to help you get there. Treatments like EMDR, neurofeedback, cognitive processing, working through all of the things that we don't normally talk about will help you get to the place where this can be free. If free is walking your dog, laughing with your spouse, doing all of these different things, it creates those same type of endorphins that the sugar, the drinking, all the other things does for you. And that's so temporary, because what that also does for you is take your brain to a space where you are still angry, frustrated, not being able to release the things that are causing you the pain. So I think it's super important for you guys to think through long term. And even if you start, I mean, I'm sure it is what's about to be April. So I will say that I'm one of the first who have lost their New Year's resolutions already. However, we can start over at any given time. You can start the process over at any given time. I actually had my first Pilates class yesterday. So these are things that, like, trying to do new things to keep yourself healthy, but it is important because this is, you know, being healthy is important to myself. It's important to my family. It's important to my community. And also it's important to you guys. I work and serve this project in this program, and I want to be able to be good for you guys and to help be healthy for you guys. And I also want you guys to do the same for the people that you guys work with as well. So please keep it.
Yeah, if I can add to that,
Yes.
we were talking about change, right? So the idea about this is a lot of times when people decide finally to make change, it's because they had a significant emotional experience about that type of change. So it has to come from the deepest, you know, from a real central point of our brain. And it can't be thought about. It's not going to happen there. It's going to be the emotion first to then think how you're going to get through something. So that idea of kind of, you know, if I go to a specialist, or if I go get some type of therapy, it's because I don't want to feel like something anymore. A lot of times that idea of that significant emotional change, sometimes it's this idea of fear or anger, but I think it's really based on shame, is a lot of this aspect of things. So the shame is that potentially emotional significant experience that I no longer want to do, which has its own cycle anyway of releasing control. I'll drink, and then, oh, maybe I'll go to therapy. I won't drink for a while. No, screw it. Immediate gratification. I'm going to go back to that. Right? I mean, that's what our society is all about. These little things that we carry on our phone. I mean, that gives us pretty much 96% of everything we could ever want, if not all. But the point of it is that it's that emotional shift that can create the change to then create a different action that creates a pattern. And that's something I want to add. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, and yeah, I love it. Just habit behavior, habit change, the process of it, habit loops, programming, neurotransmitters, all those things just all play such a crucial role, right? And I think that's the thing, like the thought process that you said, Doc, there, you know, I always think of it like the January 1st, you know, the New Year's resolution. You have that conscious thought that you want to make that change, and then it all just wears off over time because you just go back to what your habits, behaviors, and routines are, which are an unconscious, subconscious way of living, right? And we just go back to that, where the I'm going to make that's a very conscious thought. Right.
Yeah.
And
the calendar demarcation doesn't make anything happen inside.
That's right. That's right. Right. And
Exactly.
that's where, like, a lot of people, and they always say to me, like, oh, I just need motivation. No, you don't. Like, motivation is fleeting. Like, you need to develop habits, behaviors, and routines and discipline. And once you do that, it just becomes a part of who you are. You don't need motivation anymore. Like, I don't need motivation to eat good or to work.
Absolutely.
I just do it.
Yeah. We
We have
can't
a few
think our way
questions.
into motivation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Action begets more action. Right?
Yeah. And I always say, like, motivation comes after you take action. Like, I never want to work out. Like, I'm really looking forward to my workout today. I'm usually going, oh man, this is oh man. But once because I'm so disciplined and it's a habit, that when I do it, then I feel good. The motivation happens after we take action.
And
Not
you created
before.
a network. You created a network that said, this is where I'm going to go first. Because once you have that old pattern, that's the old network, and we have to override by the new network of, this is what's working for me. This is what I want to do. Well, that's still there. It's less utilized than that other one. So it is definitely transition of pattern and discipline. Oh man, the D word, holy moly. But yeah, the whole idea of like how that can change, again, the brain chemistry, the physiology, and how that can change the course of really each day of the rest of your life. I hate to be corny like that, but it truly is what happens.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's like, and now it's just wellness is just a part of who I am, right? I no longer have to think about it. I do have to override those old neurotransmitters, right? But then when I do something, like when I go get changed, my body just knows, oh, he's gonna go work out, right? Like, and all it takes is I can either stay on the couch and live in that old mindset, right? And those old feelings, or I know I gotta just get up and go get changed, and my body will take care of the rest. Because I dump myself right into that habit loop versus the other one.
All right, let's get these questions before we wrap up on our time here. Any words of encouragement for first responders who are hesitant about meeting with trauma specialists or mental health providers? This is both for Jason and Allan.
Doctor, maybe you go first.
Sure. Words of encouragement. And I say this from the deepest essence of my soul. Things can change. And that's the key is if I feel like this, if I'm doing this, if I see my family falling apart, if I see me kind of isolating, if I see me no longer being the person I once was, if I see that I'm doing these behaviors that are really harmful to myself or others, all of these things, those can change. And the encouraging word is, it's a temporary shift that's going to be a permanent kind of solution. And that's the encouragement, which is you don't have to live like this for the next 20 years. You can live like this for the next 2 weeks, get some intervention. And now I have that emotional shift. I have that new kind of relationship with myself and hopefully begin to have a relationship with others in a different way. I don't know if that's encouragement or kind of direction, but hopefully it's encouraging. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, like, I mean, I guess the way that I see it as well is like words of encouragement. I guess, you know, what are you afraid of? You know, I guess that would be my question. Like, what, you know, why are you hesitant to meet with somebody that could potentially help you, you know, and give you the tools needed to change the trajectory of your life? And you know, whether it's a trauma specialist or, you know, or a nutritionist or, you know, someone to help you quit smoking or whatever it is, like, why are you hesitant? And I know for me, and maybe this will relate with this person, is I had fear and shame, right? Like that was that self stigmatization. And I think that's why a lot of people reach out to me for help with coaching and mindset coaching and stuff with the nutrition, is because, like, I'm not going to diagnose them and give them a title, you know, and I think, like, that was what I was afraid of. I was very hesitant to go and speak to a psychologist because I was scared of getting diagnosed and now having that title, right? And so that was my fear, right? And so that's why I was very hesitant. But now that I'm on the other side of that, I mean, like when I spoke at a presentation before COVID happened there, and a psychologist came up to me and she was just super impressed with what I had to say. And she's like, one of the reasons, and maybe you can agree with this, doc, or not, but she's like, one of the ways that a first responder will not get a PTSD diagnosis from me is if they have the capability to want to make change and are showing that they're taking the steps necessary. So she's like, I guarantee you that your psychologist didn't give you a PTSD diagnosis when you went and saw them, because you had already started taking those steps to change and improve your health, that you were recognizing that things needed to change. And she's like, so for me as a practitioner, I won't diagnose somebody with PTSD if they show that they're capable of taking care of themselves and making change. So I don't know if that's the same for you, doc, or not, but, you know, and that just reaffirmed kind of like everything that I do. And the reason I was just like, I pretty much saved myself. You know what I mean? Like I recreated myself, and I mean, not that the diagnosis would have mattered for me, because I think it's just a title. It's not who I am. You know, it's a diagnosis. But for me,
moving forward.
Yeah. Like, but if you would have put me back when I was really stuck and was like, you need to go see a psychologist or a psychiatrist or mental health provider, I would have been very ashamed and I would have been very fearful and I would have closed down and shut down.
Yeah, and you mentioned fear a lot. I think the encouragement of these is fear can keep us very isolated, right? And the idea of being in that shame and what are you afraid of to come? But fear itself is probably the barrier, right? I have fears. I thought you were going to say, how do I not get a PTSD diagnosis if I actually have it? Is to not go in and see someone is how I don't get the diagnosis. So the idea about that, but it's also, what does a diagnosis mean? It means what's your experience. It is some words, right? And the label is a label, and I'm not minimizing it for sure, but the basis of it is that can I now go and do something that's going to, change what I don't already feel? But the fear, as a first responder, I would imagine in all these, you have fear all the time, but you actually have courage to go do something. There's fire. You're walking into a fire. How many people I would say, hey, go into that fire? Yeah, they'd be very fearful. No, I'm going to go into it. That's what I do. There's courage already within you. Getting over that fear to go in to see someone, I think you can use some of that courage that's already part of identity to then overcome that fear to make some change.
And would you say, Doc, that it's like the fear of the unknown? Like as a firefighter,
Sure.
I go into a fire now because I've experienced and I kind of have an idea of how it's going to go. So I kind of understand what the outcome should be. Where if I go see, a doctor, I don't know. So there's always the fear of the unknown, right?
And it's so funny you say that. I hear that almost every time. So first meeting, someone will come in and they'll be by the end of the meeting, why did I not do this years ago? I'm not really sure what held me back by fear, right? So why did I not do something that was going to be really beneficial for me, family, And it was like, all I had to do was come in and talk. And I think that's actually the fear. Will I be judged? Will they understand me? Will there be this point of like, how much will this take of my effort and I don't want to go through those emotions. Those are mucky emotions. I don't want to go through that crap.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of what's keeping someone stuck for the most part, right? So how do I get over that? And fear is something that's very real, obviously in a 1000% of once I have an understanding, some experience of it, I don't mind doing it. And I also am putting in the effort, which usually creates the progress necessary.
Yeah, I think it's a very valuable tool to have in your toolbox. It's a very valuable, it's not just one thing, like it's a puzzle, right? You got to have all, like I call it like support staff, right? Like you need to have the support staff in your corner with you that's going to help support you. So, like a psychologist, mental health professional, whatever you want to call it, you want to have a nutrition coach, you want to have a trainer, you want to have somebody help you do it. Like you got strong family, you have all of these support networks surrounding you and they're your support staff. Right? Because they're going to help encourage you when you do have those fears, right? And they're going to help encourage you and stretch you and do it safely and encouraging and give you the tools needed. And I think, like mental health professionals, I have one. I think everybody should have one. And it's part of that self-care that I've spoken about. That is also part of the tools in the toolbox. And there's so many things like EMDR. That is just another tool in the toolbox to help you recover and live your best life.
I was thinking of a quick little analogy. So the idea about it is, if I think about 12 ounce curls, right? The whole idea about this is I know that that's going to work for me in some way, right? But yet, is it really working for me? So the idea about it is it a different thing? When you were 8, 9, 10, whatever it was, when you had your first beer, right? Did you like it? I know myself, I didn't like it. It tastes freaking awful. But the basis of it is now if I drink and I drink, it becomes an experience. Not very different from therapy. It might not be it might not be tasty of what I think it's going to be, but all of a sudden, wow, this is pretty good. I'm not comparing alcohol to therapy, by the way, but I am just trying to make the analogy that
make the relation.
The experience hopefully does give the relief without a substance effect.
Yeah. So I hope that answers the individual's question.
Yeah, we got a few more questions that we want to get through in the next few minutes. Okay, Kobe, you're up.
Yeah, we got another one from Ann Griffin, says, what steps did you take to become a nutrition coach?
Well, I went to school. I got a bunch of different certifications and stuff. I went to a couple of different schools like Precision Nutrition or International Sports Science Association. Like I have a couple of different certifications to receive those certifications. So I have multiple different disciplines like fitness, nutrition specialist and stuff. So that's nutrition is specifically geared towards people that are training, like like athletes. I'm actually a certified tactical conditioning specialist, which is like a trainer for first responders, right? Like to train your body to move like first responders need to move, not your typical bodybuilder, movements. It's just how can first responders be, strong, have endurance, have flexibility, right? All of those things. I typically don't do a lot of work with that because a lot of people don't like to work out or move. So that's why I strictly focus on the nutrition, because it's people can see benefits, they feel better, and we all got to eat. So it has a bigger effect. So that's kind of where I focus all of it. But yeah, if they're asking because they want to become, get some education, become certified or whatever, become a dietitian or whatever they want to do, there's lots of schools out there that can teach you. So
Awesome. Next question. A lot of your earlier symptoms and behaviors are very similar to what would be experienced with PTSD. How did you determine / decide that what you were experiencing was not an OSI?
this is for me.
Yes.
So sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yes. So it says a lot of your earlier symptoms and behaviors were very similar to what you would experience with PTSD. How did you determine / decide that what you were experiencing was not an OSI? And I'm not sure what the OSI is standing for.
Occupational stress injury, probably.
There we go.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you know what? Like I don't know. Like I honestly don't know. I mean, maybe Dr. Wilkinson, after hearing my story, I don't know honestly. Because by the time I decided to seek professional help, I had already made that transition and was going through that process. Like I finally reached out for help when my wife was like, I want the divorce. Right. And like it was, I had it already scheduled because I was like, I know I need to get this help. And then I went away on this trip, and it was a wellness retreat. And I went away, and that's when I came back. She was like, I want a divorce. But before I left on my trip, I already had it scheduled. So I had already done a lot of work already on my own. So when she sat with me, and I think I seen her like 14 or 15 times, I think. And she was like, you don't have PTSD. She's like, I believe that you were severely depressed, that you suffer from anxiety. You're learning how to control and manage all of that. You have really good, healthy coping mechanisms in place. I understand that you're going to be going through a lot of adversity here with the divorce coming up, but she's like, I believe that you have the tools readily available to you to see this through. And she was right. But to answer your question, I don't know. I can only go back to that psychologist that told me about not getting a diagnosis by showing signs that you have the capability to actually care and take care for yourself. I don't know if maybe if I would have seen a psychologist when I was at my darkest hour, maybe I would have been diagnosed with PTSD. I don't know. I mean, Doc, I was depressed, anxiety.
Yep, exactly. The whole thing about that moving forward or using your coping strategies. So that's not avoidant behavior, right? So
Okay.
You're not doing something that's avoidant, right? I'm not going to certain settings. I'm not seeing certain people, but I'm ready to move forward even because of these things. So that's a huge criteria for PTSD, is the idea of avoidance or re-experiencing things like the nightmares or the day terrors, and the basis of the cognitive processing where things are confused. but also the idea of arousal, right? Hyperarousal, having to need that, not sleeping is a huge aspect of that. But yeah, there's criteria, obviously, in the DSM-5 and a book that says, hey, this is what it is. But and I don't know what your subjective experience is, of course, and just as you say, I don't know. There's a basis of now saying, I just knew it was time for me to make a change, and potentially a diagnosis came afterward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, so I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, right? I honestly don't know. I hope it provides some sort of clarity, but I don't know. Maybe it was just a timing thing. Like, you know what I mean? If I would have seen a psychologist the year prior, maybe I would have gotten it. You know what I mean? Like, see me when I was drunk at 10 o'clock in the morning and thinking of killing myself and had zero emotion, I probably would have got it. Right. But I think it was just a timing thing. I don't.
He said it answered. You
Okay.
answered the question. Awesome.
Yeah, I think we got a few more, looks like 2 more. Ashley Freeman, what is one small habit that you can suggest to help start this process of self-care improvement?
Yeah. Like I said, it's food, right? Because we all got to eat. I think like if you just take that step, and it doesn't have to be drastic. You don't have to be like, like, Allan, I need to know my macros and all this, blah, 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 blah. Like, it doesn't even have to be that, right? You just got to look at your situation and be like, okay, like, what are my habits? Oh, I drink 10 pops a day. Okay, well, I know if I cut that down to even 5 or 6, that's going to have a drastic effect on my health. So just those small steps, right? Or maybe just like, I know water's important. So like I have not this one, but I carry around a 4-liter water jug. Like that's my marker. Like this is my minimum water intake, right? And so just having that jug and filling it up in the morning, if I see it's noon and it's still showing 7 a.m., I'm like, man, I'm really behind. And that's my cue to like, hey, start drinking more water. So I think it's just recognizing what your current habits and behaviors are. And then where can you start to make the smallest changes? So maybe it's just water. Like I'm going to drink 2 liters of water today. That's what I'm going to make this habit. And you just, that's it. Just work on water. Water, 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 water. And when you got water good, when you don't even have to think about it anymore, when you're just going to the sink and you're filling up your water bottle every day and that becomes a habit, then you can go, okay, I need to look at, processed food. Okay, how can I improve this? Okay, maybe I'm going to start cooking at home instead of eating out all the time. Maybe I'll start with 1 meal a day. I'm going to cook at home and just start and just take it small baby steps, right? And just start that process. But you got to start somewhere. And you don't have to be perfect. Like a lot of my clients are like, if it ain't perfect, it ain't worth doing. And I always tell them, and it's just like progress over perfection. Like, I do not want you to be perfect. Perfect does not exist. Don't try to achieve perfection. But what I do want to see you do is I want you to be consistent, because consistency is key. Consistency will build habits. Perfection doesn't build anything. It actually sets you up for failure, right? So don't worry about being perfect. Aim for 2 liters of water a day. If you get 1.5, awesome, because you weren't doing that before. So be proud of that, carry on, and do it again tomorrow. That's where I would say, that's where I would suggest. Start small, pick one thing and stick with it.
Very cool. The
I was
next
just
question says,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna add increasing awareness. Awareness is half the battle, right? So if I increase awareness, the question that you can ask yourself while doing that is this working for me? Is this not working for me? That's just the beginning. It's because then it creates the decision, right? And then that decision creates, potentially a new behavior or pattern. But is this working for me? Is this not working for me? When you have that type of, cognition or that awareness that's there, you're then going to say to yourself, is that actually really working for me, and how? And then it kind of becomes an idea of, this is what I'm going to do with it. So
yeah, for sure. And that's the thing. I think I always say, like, the first step to change is awareness. You have to be aware of like what your habits, patterns, and behaviors are. And that's why I was like, look at what your habits are and then decide what you want to start to work on. Right. Because yeah, it's an unconscious thing. We do it without thinking about it. If you drink 12 pops a day, you do it without even thinking about it.
Absolutely.
Right. It's an unconscious thing. So you have to become aware of it first in order to go, okay, I need to make a change. What's that change going to be? What's the small step that I can do consistently? And don't strive for perfection. Please don't strive for perfection. Go for consistency.
Cool. Okay. So the next question says, thank you for such motivating information. How to maintain a new lifestyle and new healthy habits when your family keeps following their usual normal lifestyle?
Doc, you want me to go first?
Either one. I think you guys
Either.
mentioned some of these tips, but yeah, this one is
Yeah.
when supports are.
Yeah, my two cents on this, and it's going to be really easy, and you're not going to like it, is the environment that you're in is going to be your greatest influence for how you're going to behave and what you're going to think and feel. When it comes down to that type of support, the accountability partner that you might have will not be in your immediate support with your family. So it could be someone that's out, it could be an app, it could be whatever it's going to be. It's very challenging to change when an environment around you does not change. We know that from just regular people going off to inpatient or rehabilitation and coming back in the exact same environment and making the old same choices that they once did, right? So how do you do that? You create a support externally from that, and that becomes the, hopefully, if you want to make the change, the primary influence for what you're connecting with, who you're connecting.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more, right? I mean, our environment has a direct impact on our decision makings, and I mean, we will become the average of the 5 people we surround ourselves with the most. And I think if you're wanting to like lose weight, improve your life, quit smoking or whatever, you have to kind of surround yourself with the support staff that are doing that. Because then just by you hanging around them, naturally you're going to become a byproduct of that. But it is challenging. I mean, at least, like for me in my household, I mean, my spouse now is very, very supportive. Our kids know no different. I mean, she was very athletic before we got together, very health conscious. So it was a very easy blend. But I understand that, yeah, like, you may want to do this and you have a spouse or children that are just like, no. I would just strongly encourage like having open communication with your spouse, like to really sit down with your spouse and have this conversation on why you feel it's important to make this change. Because as humans, we all hate change. We hate it, right? We hate the unknown. We don't want change. But change is also important as well. So I think if our spouse can truly understand why we want to make change, and you have that open dialogue, right? And just go like, it'll just start with me, like, and what I'll always say is like, you don't have to get the chips out of the house, right? Like, like put them somewhere that's inconvenient for you. Right? If your kids want them or your husband or spouse want them, let them have them, but put them somewhere that it's inconvenient for you. So it's inconvenient for me to go to my basement, so maybe my chips hang out in the basement, right? Or you just have that open conversation with your support staff and really let them know like why it's important to you. And I think that's a really great start as well, because then it opens the door. Right? Like, I just want to feel better. I want to improve myself. Can we start looking at things? And I'll start with me. And this is just going to be all me. Right? You can keep doing what you're doing, but this will just be all on me. I will.
And then that could become modeling for them as well. It could start
right.
with you, and then hopefully they start to make the shift as they see the benefits that you have, but extremely challenging. There's no doubt about it.
Very challenging. So I hope that answers your question. Oh, I think you're muted. Yeah, there we go.
How did you know when you need to walk away from being a first responder, or you just need more therapy coping mechanisms? This is a big question, actually.
Wow.
Kind of a tough question. Yeah.
like I'm a big believer of following your heart. You got to really just kind of ask yourself, like, like, why are you there? And is this bringing value into your life? And this goes for everything, not just the job, but is this providing value in your life? Is what you're doing helping you show up and be the best version of you that you could possibly be? Or is this actually causing more stress and more anxiety and stuff? And I know, like, a lot of people fear leaving the industry because, like, it's what we do and we're so good at it, and a lot of us get in at such a young age, and it just becomes what we know, and it becomes a part of life. So it's hard to imagine doing anything different. And then that brings in the whole fear of the unknown, like, well, if I'm not a firefighter, then who am I? And that brings in a whole identity crisis thing. And then if you don't really know who you are and you've kind of lost yourself, it can make it very, very scary, right? So we tend to stay somewhere where maybe we're kind of past due, but we stay there because it's comfortable. It's what we know. There's security there. I get a paycheck every 2 weeks or a pension or whatever. But in the long run, it's really damaging to you. Like, at the end, will you be able to enjoy your pension? Will you be, like, are you being the dad or the mom that you need to be for your family? Are you being the spouse that you need to be? Are you being the first responder that the community deserves to have come up to their door? Like, so I think all of those things, but it ultimately comes down to, like, are you happy? And are you healthy? And if you're not, then take the steps necessary to start to get better and to start to become happier and healthier. And then if it's still not there, then at least you can make the decision, because you've taken the proper steps to make sure that you're functioning at your best first before you decide that, like, it's the job that's the problem. Like, maybe it's you're not taking care of yourself, and the job is just, that's an outside stress that is the straw that breaks the camel's back. But if you take care of your health and you build that mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual resiliency, you might be able to stay for years. You have a good support team. You have Dr. Wilkinson in your pocket, and you have, FTS or FST, sorry, in your pocket, and you have all of these other tools. You might be like, man, I got another 15 years out of this career. So I think, like, yeah, sorry.
No, I just want to add, part of that is in the helping professions. There's three things when we know that we get really burned out. One is emotional exhaustion. So when you don't have the capacity any longer to kind of have that empathy, that's one thing. The other is personal satisfaction. And if I'm no longer kind of, again, as Allan said, the idea of, is it part of my identity? Is it, if I'm not satisfied at all for a very long time, I have to figure out what that actually means, because I'm losing my purpose, kind of a thing. And then the third is depersonalization. When I kind of just do things so robotically that I'm really not connecting to what the job is offering at that point. Because when you do, let's say, help someone, a call goes really well, and it's kind of like, there's no real celebration, obviously, that happens within that, but it is like, is it a pat on the back? Like, do I actually say, hey, that did okay? Of course, I'm not going to do that because it's my job. But the basis of it is can I still say there's some humanity here that I have been a part of in a helping way? But I think, and as Allan was saying there, I think the final actually question there is, do I stay in this as a first responder or not, or do I need more therapy? The idea about that is, I think the therapy is a good way to go, because then you're kind of exploring what that is, and then as maybe some of the muck, I guess, if I can say that again, is going away, and those three things start to look a little different: the emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and the personal satisfaction. Basis of it is yeah, maybe I can stay because I'm having a different perspective, because nothing's changed over 2, 6, 20 years. And then, okay, now I have to figure this out. But I'd have to say, and Allan said it, are you happy? I'm going to put that in a different way. Do you not like yourself because of what you do? That's a different question. So there's happiness, there's satisfaction, but do I actually just kind of despise now me if I keep going in every day and just nothing, you talked about the dark cloud or the black cloud, right? The whole idea of like, that doesn't feel good. But if that's the case, I think that's where the therapeutic intervention becomes a real value. And those other things are burnout characteristics. So hope that answered.
Wow. You two are amazing. This was such a good webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone who stayed on a little bit longer. I know we went about 15 minutes over our normal time. And if there's any questions, any other burning things that you would like us to get to Allan or Dr. Wilkinson, please let us know and send those questions over to us. Just a reminder, we talked a little bit with that last question, which was a great question, who submitted that last question. But if you are wondering about some of these things we talked about today, PTSD, anxiety, burnout, suicidal ideations, all of these things, and you're wondering if you're at risk, go to the website, fst5.org, and we have a section on the website that says, am I at risk? So literally you can take a screening that you can go through and ask yourself some of these questions. We do not record the answers. It's not recorded in the website. No one can see who it is. Everything's completely anonymous. And sometimes just having an idea of where you're starting at could give you the next steps to if you want to go and talk to someone else, or if you want to explore this a little bit further. So if you want to explore this idea of PTSD, or are you feeling some burnout right now? And our burnout quiz actually has 3 different quizzes embedded in that to determine the depersonalization. Are you really losing like your passion for this, your purpose and motivation for the work that you're doing? So all of that, these are things that we do on a daily basis as clinicians as well. So it's there for you to use that tool. Please share it with other people as well. In addition to, again, if you are in need of any resources or a crisis, please don't hesitate to call 1-833-34-STRONG. Okay, am I missing anything? Dr. Wilkinson, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You
Pleasure.
guys can talk to him further if you come on over to Wayne State, the Department of Psychiatry. He, again, is our EMDR specialist, our neurofeedback specialist, and he is one of my favorite doctors. So I'm not just biased, he really is. Allan, thank you so much. Please plug your website, your social medias, your coaching. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, on Facebook, Third Alarm Coaching, you can reach me there, just send me a friend request, like privately, just my name, Allan Dignard. Send me a Facebook Messenger, contact me through there, or you can contact me through my support emails on Third Alarm Coaching. It's support@thirdalarmcoaching.com. Yeah, and just reach out, don't be afraid to ask for help. It's going to be one of the best things that you guys can do. It's the best thing that I did, and I recommend it for everybody. And yeah, just keep taking care of yourself, guys. It's so important.
Awesome. We'll plug Allan's information and websites and ways that you can access him once we post the recordings of the video as well. Kobe, any last thoughts?
No, just thank you too for joining us. It was probably one of my favorite webinars. You guys did great together. Just want to mention, just keep on our Facebook. You'll see webinars. We also have podcasts. We have the 2nd episode up there. So check that through any of your podcast streaming. With that, April 19th. Yep. And April 19th is our next webinar, and we're going to have actually one of the hosts of the podcast on there, Mike, and he's going to be talking the importance of peer support. So please just keep track of our social media, and we post everything on there along with this recording. It'll be on there soon. Thank you again. You guys rocked it. Loved it.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excellent.
Yes, Allan, thank you so much. I know the begging was kind of low, but the guilt worked. So Thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here, and Dr. Wilkinson, it was an honor to do this webinar with
Pleasure's
you.
mine. Yes,
And
indeed.
I would love to connect offline and stuff like that as well.
Great.
So
Will
COVID
do.
or whatever, we can connect offline. But yeah, thank you very much, guys. And I hope we provided some value here for you guys tonight. And don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah. My last little thing, just be good to yourself and your future self. So
Gotcha.
there's that.
Yes. Yep. Awesome. Great. You can find our webinars, podcasts on the website, in addition to our social medias, Facebook, FST, Frontline Strong Together, and Instagram, MI as in for Michigan, FST5, and also on LinkedIn, Frontline Strong Together. Again, you can find all of those on the website. You can click to them there. So we thank you all so very much for joining us. This has been awesome. You guys are amazing. We will see you guys in a few weeks, a little less than a month.
Thanks,
Take care,
Manisha.
guys.
Thanks, Kobe.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you.